The late afternoon sun was baking the asphalt on Magnolia Lane, turning the air thick and syrupy, when the first shrill sound hit me. A sound I'd learned to dread since moving into this tightly wound homeowners association community, and my stomach immediately dropped to my knees. I looked across the yard and saw Brenda, the neighborhood Karen naturally, standing at the edge of the small, overgrown creek bed, hands planted firmly on her hips, her face a mask of scarlet indignation as she aggressively pointed a perfectly manicured finger at my quiet, 17-year-old daughter, Maya. "What in the actual hell are you doing trespassing on homeowners association property? Young lady?" Brenda's voice sliced through the humid air like a rusty saw, demanding an audience and starting the fight before I could even clear the front porch. I rushed down the steps, my sandals slapping against the concrete, feeling that familiar, defensive heat rising in my chest. What was the issue this time? Maya, usually so reserved and quick to retreat, was standing her ground, a faded denim apron tied around her waist and a small trowel in one hand, looking utterly confused next to the tiny, beautiful patch of wild mint and lavender she'd lovingly cultivated over the last 6 weeks. "It's not homeowners association property, Ms. Brenda. It's just the drainage ditch," Maya replied softly, but her voice was tight with the effort of staying calm, and the sight of her trembling lower lip made me instantly furious. Brenda laughed. A short, unpleasant bark that carried too far in the suburban stillness. "Oh, the audacity. Don't you try to tell me what's community land and what's not. I've lived here for 15 years. I know where the boundary markers are, and you are clearly digging up protected common resources. You better stop right now, or I swear. I'm calling the police." "The police?" I stopped dead, throwing my hands up in exasperation. Was she serious? "Brenda, relax. This is ridiculous," I interjected, stepping between them. The smell of damp earth and freshly turned mulch suddenly overpowering the jasmine from Brenda's own prize-winning porch planters. "Maya is just tending a small patch of wildflowers. She's not building a bunker or running a meth lab. Look at how small it is. It's less than 20 square feet." I tried to inject some humor, hoping to diffuse the situation, but Brenda only got louder, pulling out her phone with theatrical urgency. "It's not about the size, Sarah. It's about the principle. We have rules here, and that section clearly falls outside the established lot lines. You need to teach your daughter some respect for property rights, and since you won't, I guess the deputies will." The clicking sound of her nails against her phone screen was like a tiny, aggressive drum solo, confirming she'd done it. She'd actually called the non-emergency line over a couple of hostas. Why did she always have to take it to the extreme? I took a deep, shaky breath, feeling the air constrict in my throat. I looked at Maya, whose eyes were wide and filled with hurt, and squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "It's okay, sweetie. Let's just go wait inside. Let the system play this out." The next 20 minutes felt like an eternity, punctuated by the nervous chatter of my own heart and the distant, whining sound of a lawn service truck. I was replaying the closing of the house in my mind, remembering the mountains of paperwork, the tedious line-by-line review of the deed, and a flicker of a memory about a particularly confusing easement notation on the far corner of our lot. I had asked our realtor about it, and he just waved it off with a smile and a "don't worry, it's just leftover paperwork from a lot split decades ago. Nothing important, just covers the old creek bed that dried up. Nothing important." "Huh?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. This was exactly the kind of meaningless, petty drama I had hoped to leave behind when we moved here. Then the show began. First came the unmistakable, low rumble of a sheriff's department SUV, lights flashing in a slow, rhythmic blue and red against the twilight. Seconds later, a sleek black sedan pulled up. That was Mr. Jenkins, the Homeowners Association liaison, who always showed up like a vulture to confirm a rule violation. Brenda was already back outside, now wearing a triumphant smirk and a fresh coat of lipstick, practically leaping to greet the deputies, gesturing wildly toward the disputed patch of dirt. I walked out calmly, Maya right behind me, holding her trowel like a small, defiant flag. "Deputies," Brenda announced in a sickly sweet but authoritative voice. "I am Brenda Miller, and this is a clear case of trespassing and vandalism on shared community space. I have the property line maps right here. She unfurled a massive, laminated plot map that looked incredibly official, pointing to a thick, dotted line that seemed to confirm her accusation. My stomach plummeted again. Had I been wrong? One of the deputies, a tall man named Officer Reyes, politely nodded and took the map. The other deputy walked over to the old, crooked oak tree that Brenda claimed was the marker, pulling out a professional GPS device. Mr. Jenkins, the homeowners association guy, just stood there with his arms crossed, looking bored and judgmental. Ms. Miller, Officer Reyes said, holding up the fancy GPS reader, we're going to use the county's digital plat overlay. It's usually more accurate than the printed homeowners association maps. Brenda sniffed dismissively. It won't make a difference, officer. I'm telling you that section is common ground, and these people are illegal residents trying to claim what isn't theirs. The deputy at the tree kept adjusting his device, occasionally muttering to himself, and then he looked up, a curious expression on his face. Officer Reyes walked over, looked at the screen, and then slowly back at Brenda, whose smile was already starting to look a little strained. Ms. Miller, could you step over here, please? He asked, his voice now noticeably firmer. Brenda marched over, radiating confidence. Officer Reyes pointed at the glowing screen. According to the official county records, that original lot split your community was built on in 1982 included a very specific meets and bounds description for the lots bordering this creek bed. He zoomed in on the device. The previous owner of the common land filed a revised deed in '94 before the homeowners association was fully established, specifically incorporating the entire area up to the trunk of this oak tree, including the dried creek bed, into the legal description of the lot currently owned by Miss Sarah Peterson. The air went silent, heavy, and thick with the smell of Brenda's expensive perfume. Wait, what? My mind flashed back to the realtor's offhand comment about leftover paperwork. That was the secondary twist. The paperwork was important. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a rush of disbelief, and then pure, sweet vindication. Brenda's carefully cultivated tan turned a deep, splotchy purple. That's impossible. You're reading it wrong. The fence line? She stammered, pointing wildly at a few splintered pickets that had clearly been there since the Reagan administration. Officer Reyes shook his head gently. Ma'am, the fence is purely arbitrary. This GPS plot shows the legal line runs a full 8 feet past where the fence used to stand, putting all of this cultivated area squarely inside Lot 14's, Miss Peterson's official boundary. Your laminated map is referencing an outdated plat that was superseded 30 years ago by a recorded deed amendment. He then looked directly at Mr. Jenkins, the homeowners association liaison, who suddenly looked very small and uncomfortable. Mr. Jenkins, you might want to update your common area map. The final, glorious blow landed like an anvil dropped from the sky. Officer Reyes turned his attention back to Brenda, his expression now completely serious. Ms. Miller, your claim of trespassing is unfounded, and your neighbors, Ms. Peterson and her daughter, are entirely within their legal rights to use and cultivate their property. Furthermore, misuse of emergency services to settle a private civil dispute, especially one involving harassment of a minor, is a serious offense. I strongly suggest you leave the Petersons' property immediately and not engage with them further. Brenda stood there, mouth agape, her face a magnificent portrait of pure, unadulterated shock and defeat. She sputtered something about calling her lawyer and the homeowners association president. But the words dissolved into the silence as she finally retreated, marching stiffly back to her house without a single backward glance, the epitome of a Karen defeated by the cold, hard evidence of the law. I looked at Maya, who finally let out a long, shaky breath, a sound more powerful than any scream, and the relief in her eyes was palpable. Mr. Jenkins mumbled a quick, embarrassed apology, promising to review the deeds, and scurried off. As the deputies drove away, their tail lights disappearing down the road, I realized the tightness in my chest was gone, replaced by a quiet, deep satisfaction. We stood there under the cooling sky, looking at the small, humble patch of mint and lavender that was now legally, unequivocally ours. It was a powerful lesson. Sometimes, The greatest defense against the loud certainty of a bully isn't yelling back, but simply holding the paper that proves the truth is on your side. Justice, I thought, wrapping my arms around my daughter, is often quiet, but it always has the final word. Let this be a reminder that standing your ground against the entitled few, armed with nothing but the facts, will always lead to a sweeter victory than you could ever imagine.